Welcome to the Season 9 Overwatch 2 tier list. Of course, this is the biggest patch Overwatch 2 has gotten since its release, so this is gonna have to be first impressions. However, this is gonna be the best first impressions tier list out there because I already have a head start from a high GM scrim that my team, Warwick Angels, had a few days ago with a workshop code that emulated the new patch. Obviously, I am ill and I'm recording and I'm just realizing how bad my voice is. Admittedly, not all changes, like the Farah and projectile size changes were included, but most of them were. And if you see this anti-nade effect screen in the background gameplay, that was the attempted visualization of the DPS passive, just so you guys don't get confused. Obviously, if you want to learn from the highest levels of Overwatch, or if you want to watch me stream, follow the link down below to my team's Twitch. Starting off in D tier, I think most of us can agree that Weaver is probably going to be the biggest loser of the bunch. His entire job or unique selling point as a hero, being the sheer volume of healing outputs, has been nerfed by the DPS passive. Life grip is still going to be useful obviously, but the sustain changes don't really affect him since Weaver was already unkillable last patch, so I think Weaver is going to be in his worst state since launch. After Weaver, I have Mauga. This guy is really gonna struggle. I'll tell you right now that any tank that hasn't got a ton of mobility or a way of mitigating the DPS passive is not gonna have fun, aka the brawl tanks without shields. And this applies straight to Mauga. The DPS passive is gonna hit you like a truck, and I wouldn't be surprised if it applies to your cardiac overdrive, which is a form of healing. Ending off the D tier, I have Hog. Now in ranked, before Season 9, Hog was tearing it up. I think Hog is only good in ranked because people refuse to go Mei for some reason and wall the guy off, making him way more killable, but regardless. Hog's breather and damage reduction will take a notable hit due to the DPS passive, and not to mention, he can't one-shot anymore with the HP increase, unless you maybe have your pig pen, but even those are going to be off cases. Before I continue, just a quick plug on my coaching. If you want to get a head start on Season 9, hit up the link down below and I promise you won't regret it. Starting off the C tier, which are situational heroes, I have Junkrat. Now I know there's a Hydron clip going around of the projectile size changes, making him hit the blind side of a barn, but think about why Junkrat was being picked in the first place. It's because of the one shots, or technically the two shots. That was why Junkrat was picked in higher ranks, but now that's no longer a thing, so Junkrat needs to find value elsewhere, but I don't see how. After Junkrat, I have Queen. Yeah, she's fallen quite a bit from my last tier list. But why is that? Well, a large part of it is that DPS passive, making it hard for Queen to live and get value out of her own passive, but another big part of it is the projectile size changes. Queen notoriously has a slender hitbox, and now it's going to be a lot easier for all the players to consistently pile the damage onto Queen. She still has a strong ultimate as a win condition, but I think she's going to be niche. After Queen, I have Cassidy. Cassidy's selling point as a hero was that you could dish out consistent hit scan damage while still having the sustain to live through a dive. That is still true now, but I think that selling point is gonna have to drop in price this patch, because everyone has more sustain now. Deadeye is still bad, you have no vertical mobility, the universal healing passive only really affects you out of combat. Yeah, I don't see Cassidy getting amazing use this patch. After Cass is Torb, and he's here for similar reasons. Honestly, these guys are interchangeable, but I think the projectile size change helps Torb's issue of consistency more, and heroes that I think are going to be strong, namely Winston and Tracer, Torb has good matchups into. After Torb, I have Zarya. Zarya's biggest weakness, especially into the brawl tanks, was the sustain, and thankfully, she's able to at least have the option to cleanse the DPS passive with bubbles. She's also always had strong consistent damage that's going to be easier to land now, but it's just unfortunate that Ryan and Winston, maybe the two best tanks this patch, have good matchups into her. After Zarya, I have Brig. Obviously, she's not benefiting much due to the projectile size changes here, and I don't really know how useful her defensive peel is going to be, considering Lucio can do her job more reliably with the projectile size changes. And Lucio provides a hell of a lot more. After Brig is Illari. Yes, Illari in C tier, first time ever. The issue with Illari is that her unique ability to be the best support duelist isn't really true anymore. Her pylon's gotten plenty of nerfs over time, and the DPS passive makes her pylon even worse, and her breakpoint changes means that she can't two-shot Tracer like on last patch. Ending off the C tier is Farah. I'm being tentative with this one, but I hope that she's just not a worse version of Echo now. For those who don't know, she's basically a lot more mobile and fluid, but she can't stay in the air as longer. If you've got good cover usage and roof management, you should be fine hopefully. Starting off the B tier, I have Reaper. Now a theme you'll see in this video is that this change is going to help heroes who are reliant on uptime help keep it. And Reaper is, on paper, one of those heroes. Beforehand, it was way too easy for Reaper to get pre-fired on his TP and forced out. But now with the HP increases, this could be changed. I'm a little doubtful it's going to do much, but anything that can give Reaper more uptime is good for his cycle. Next up is Moira. Again, uptime is a key thing here, and the TikTok Moira playstyle is only going to get better. But her full healing playstyle has taken an obvious hit this patch. After Moira, I have Bastion. He didn't feel awful in that new patch scrim that I had a few days ago, with Ironclad stacking with the HP increases, and with Monkey being the best dive tank, giving Bastion some added utility, rather than just being an additional variation to the Lucio Mei Brawl comp. After Bastion, I have Kiriko. Yes, everyone's been saying how Kiriko can't 2-tap anymore, but how important was this? Because I think Kiriko's main value was hard flanking at no risk, forcing out a disproportionate amount of resources, then dipping. Getting a kill was optional. Sure, I think the reward of Kiriko flanking is going to be a bit worse, but I don't think you can convince me that she's going to be a bad pick this season. After Kiri, I have Hanzo. Hanzo's greatest strength was the ability to always one-shot at any time, but now that's not going to happen. His Storm Arrows did get a slight damage buff from 65 to 75, but guess what? It still requires 4 arrows to confirm a kill. After Hanzo, I have Mercy. Now of course, breakpoints are going to be really important here, and I put Mercy after Hanzo because of that one-shot breakpoints. Paired with the projectile size increase, and I've been having high GM players tell me that Pocket Hanzo could be great in ranked. The issue is that Sombra Tracer Bull stuff could be the Achilles heel to this, but we'll have to see. After Kiri, I have Ramattra. He's just a worse Reinhardt, I'm sorry to say. Now that doesn't mean that he's bad, in fact, his block can be really powerful to negate the DPS passive and just to absorb every bit of damage that you toss at him. But his pummel's not being buffed compared to Reinhardt's swing, and Reinhardt having a better ultimate than Ramattra, at least in their direct matchup, mean that in my opinion, Ram's going to be good, but I think Ryan's going to be better. After Ram, I have Doomfist. Here on screen is a peak 31 Doomfist player telling you that he's fine, and actually telling me to put him in A tier. So, he's fine. Moving on. After Doomfist is Genji. The thing bringing Genji down from A tier last patch are just the breakpoints. One of the main selling points of Genji was that instant burst damage, which he still has, but I think his alternative, being Echo, who offers more consistent damage, will be a tad bit better. Faster blade swings is a nice touch, though you now need an extra swing to confirm a kill. After Genji, I have D.Va. I think any tank that has the ability to mitigate the DPS passive at any moment in time is inherently going to be decent. But D.Va's main selling point for me is marking the dive heroes who are going to have more sustain this patch. Tracers, Genjis, Winstons, Echoes, you name it, D.Va should be marking them, and that selling point is always going to be invaluable for the average player. After D.Va, I have Orisa. Another broad dive tank with no shield, but unlike Mauga, Orisa has more range and more sustain that is independent of how much damage she deals. The real bonus to Orisa though is the projectile size change. To heroes like Junker Queen, that doesn't really matter, but to Orisa, who has a consistent beam of little pellets that have now gotten bigger, paired with the fall off change last patch, and she could really be slept on. After Orisa, I have Ana. First time Ana's been below A tier ever since the Overwatch 2 release. Before, especially in chaotic environments, you could nade someone as Ana and they seriously had the chance to just blow up, but now with the HP increases, this is no longer the case. Nade is still good, don't get me wrong, but support utility in general has less staying power. Her high individual healing and her ultimates are still going to be selling points, and she's always going to be a popular pick across all ranks, but her being a must pick is unlikely. Next up, I have Sojourn. Yes, the reason why she has fallen a bit is going to be because of the one-shots, but she still brings value to the table with her horizontal and vertical mobility. After Sojourn, I have Sombra. This patch fixes one of Sombra's biggest issues, uptime. More HP means she can stay farming her ult for longer, and the projectile size changes are welcome too. From what I've seen and heard, Sombra Tracer is decently common in higher elos right now, and I think Poke Dive might make a comeback. After Sombra is Ball. Now I know people like Metro and Samito have called Ball bad, but think about it. Ball's issue was that whenever he left the front line to flank, the rest of his team would get rolled over. But because of the HP increases, this is no longer going to be the case. Not to mention, the DPS passive means fuck all to this guy because you were never reliant on your healers in the first place. I think Ball is a low-key winner in this patch, and I've been seeing him get quite a bit of play in high GM lobbies. Starting off the A tier, I have Symmetra. If you played Sim before this patch, you know that our orbs had quite a big hitbox comparatively to what it visually looked like. Now, that's even bigger. With the lack of one-shots too, I also expect it to be strong in brawl mirrors, alongside with the brawl comp in general, to enable that composition to be played on maps where historically, it's not amazing to play on. After Sim, I have Mei. Listen guys, I've been one-tricking Mei a ton recently, and while last patch is obviously not the same as this one, the key strength with Mei is that her macro value doesn't require mechanical skill, aka landing your walls. Now with this patch, if you can't aim like me, you're eating good, because now you're getting value out of both your walls and your icicles. Sure, you can't one-shot Tracer anymore, but that was never really the main selling point of Mei. It matters for sure in some cases, but it's a cherry on the top compared to your wall value. After Mei, I have Baptiste. Immortality is based upon a percentage of HP and not a number, so that will still have utility. Bap also brings a ton of consistent damage to the table, which heroes like Illari do as well, but Bap's kit is just so well rounded and he fits in so many different comps that it'd be disingenuous for me to put him at the same peg as her. After Bap, I have Ashe. Dynamite and DPS passive is going to go crazy of course, but it's really other DPS heroes getting weaker or not bringing much to the table that allows Ashe to shine more. Are we forgetting how strong Bob is too, which can trigger the DPS passive without needing to do anything extra? After Ashe, I have Zen. Zen's Discord is obviously a clear counterweight to the HP increases, but it's the increase in sustain too that also bears a decent amount of weight. Zen's hitbox also doesn't suffer too much from the projectile size increase changes, because who on last patch was missing their shots onto a Zenyatta hitbox? Those players who are missing have already retired or they play heroes that don't require much mechanical skill. In essence, I think Zen is pretty good on this patch, and that's something we got a general note of in our scrims too. Next up is Echo. The projectile size increase applies to all three of her tri-shot parts, and considering her beam works on a percentage base of health instead of an exact number, she's looking like an always solid pick this season. She's also always been a great pick to bully out Winstons in the staging phase too. After Echo, I have Soldier. Now when I made this tier list, I had one question. Who wins in a duel? A Soldier or a Sojourn with the fully charged railgun from 20 meters away? On last patch, it was the Sojourn. On this patch, I genuinely think it's the Soldier more times than not. Now he just tanks the headshots, places down his heal pad, and beams the Sojourn with his projectile size buff. My only concern is that against the Winston Tracer comps, he's not going to be great, because he hasn't got that burst mobility like a power slide, but we've seen it work before in the 2022 Overwatch League season. Speaking of Tracer, she's up next, and I think for the average player, she's undoubtedly going to be buffed. The thing with Tracer that put off a lot of players was the mechanical tracking, and now that's going to be less of an issue. Not to mention the breakpoint changes and that power crept 6 damage gun. Against her counters being Cass, Illari and Torb, Tracer has never really been better. After Tracer, I have Sigma. Flux will still be great, his shield and grasp can help counteract the DPS passive, he already didn't need a huge amount of healing to keep him up. Yeah, I think he's a solid pick all around this season. Issue is that against Winston Reinhardt, he hasn't got great individual matchups, but the game is more than just tank v tank matchups. After Sigma, I have Winston. The DPS increase is pretty big and actually offsets the ult charge increase. If Winston did 66 DPS, then he charges ultimate at the exact same rate, but he doesn't. He deals 75 now. The bubble also helps counteract the DPS passive too, and now he can actually jump and threaten flanks because of the sustain and damage increase. Now entering the S tier, where I ideally have one hero per role, I have Widowmaker. God almighty man, I'm just glad she has fall off, because now Widowmaker is going to be the only hero who can independently one-shot in Overwatch 2. And not just that, but it's also easier to hit the one-shots now because of the size increase. Widow's never been higher than B tier in my lists, because the average player can't hit heads. But now, that's going to be up for debate. After Widow, I have Ryan. I think he's just clearly the best tank in the game right now. His pin can still one-shot most squishies, his swing got buffed to 100 damage, and similar to Winston, he'll charge his ultimate faster now. His shield can also mitigate the DPS passive, and that dive up playstyle where you need to pin to quickly duel squishies is going to be easier because you have more HP to play with. Last but not least, I have Lucio. I think Lucio is one of the safest picks to put in S tier at the moment. It's really the projectile size increase that makes Lucio a more attractive option, and what Lucio player hasn't mentioned the boot buff too. More HP also means that it's harder to Ajax, and Lucio's flexible design gives him freedom to play in a variety of different comps regardless of what turns out to be meta. And that's it for the tier lists. A lot of placements, especially Pharah and a lot of heroes in the B tier, can be subject to fluctuates, and at least for the next few weeks, I think a lot of different comps are going to be viable. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time.